Hello again. I shall have to choose my words very carefully when talking about this topic because even a few years after the COVID pandemic, YouTube is still very touchy about what they describe in their community guidelines as medical misinformation. I have in the past fallen foul of those guidelines and been suspended for a week at a time, so I had best be pretty cautious about what I say now. In the first instance, I invite viewers to look at the thumbnail to this video. It is a graph from the United States Centre for Disease Control, a very reputable body in America. This graph shows deaths from influenza, more commonly known as flu, during the period of 2019 to 2023. I also give a link in the description to this video to the report from which this graph is taken, so that viewers may examine it at their leisure. You will see that in the period 2019 to 2020, there were 199 deaths caused by flu. That's pretty much average, that's what you expect. Then in the year 2020 to 2021, just a single person died from flu. In 2021 to 2022, there were 49 deaths, and by 2022 to 2023, deaths from flu were back to normal, with 174 deaths. Clearly, something miraculous happened in 2020 to reduce mortality rates from influenza to zero and greatly reduce them until 2022. When they began to climb again. This graph for mortality from flu matches precisely those for cases of flu both in the United States and also Britain and other countries. In other words, the incidence of flu simply collapsed during that same period. The figures provided by the Office for National Statistics in this country show flu cases dropping dramatically in Britain for the years 2020 and 2021 before picking up to their usual levels in 2023. The World Health Organization has published its own graphs which show a similar pattern, that influenza almost vanished for 2 years or so, with hardly any cases being reported before the figures returned to normal. What are we to make of all this? On the face of it, it looks as though a miracle cure for flu might have been discovered in the spring of 2020, and that this new treatment reduced the number of cases very greatly. And in the United States, mortality from that cause dropped essentially to zero. There was, of course, no such development in medicine, which we can see from the current crisis in Britain, where an epidemic of influenza is currently brewing. So what did happen in 2020 and 2021 to cause such an extraordinary fall in diagnoses of flu and deaths from that cause? Was anything else going on in those years? Well, of course, this disappearance of flu matched almost precisely the COVID pandemic. I can think offhand of 3 possible hypotheses for what is observed. One which has been suggested in medical journals is that the lockdowns, combined with all the sanitizers and masks, brought about a halt in the spreading of influenza. This may be so, but then one would have thought that if those measures had such an effect on flu infections, we would have seen a similar fall in cases and mortality of COVID. After all, these are both viruses which affect the respiratory system. Why did those things like masks and hand sanitizers wipe out flu but not COVID? It's a puzzle because the fall in cases of flu was matched by a rise in cases of COVID. Another explanation might be that COVID infections were present with flu and that the flu was therefore somehow disguised in the statistics. I had best not set out the third and to me most likely explanation for all this, lest I be penalised by YouTube, but I have actually heard doctors and nurses discussing this third possibility and tacitly admitting that it was almost certainly what was going on. I will leave viewers to think for themselves what this final explanation for what is seen could possibly be.